Hi, Glenys.
Hey, Aaron. What do you want to talk about today?
How much I hate diets.
Yeah, diets suck.
So what do you do instead of a diet?
Intuitive eating, health at every size.
So how many times have you had to explain intuitive eating and health at every size to someone?
Like 5,000 times. But that was just to my doctor.
Okay, so how many times have you explained it to someone and then they said, but diets are the only thing I know?
That's like every time. Can we pursue health without thinking about weight?
Yes, we can pursue health without thinking about weight.
That's pretty revolutionary, what you just said. But what if you just don't like yourself at the size that you're at?
I think we need to understand why, instead of just saying I need to change.
So, what's the deal with body positivity?
Oh man, that's a long answer. I'm Aaron Flores.
And I'm Glenys Oyston, and we are Dietitians Unplugged. Welcome back to another Dietitians Unplugged episode. I am here with my awesome co-host, Aaron Flores.
And
Hey,
I'm here with
Aaron.
my awesome co-host, Glenys Oyston. What's up, Glenys?
Oh, what's up? Well, since we're committed to not asking one another
Oh, shoot. I got to
how
stop.
we're doing. No, what's up is good.
Is it?
Yeah, because
All right.
now I can tell you this is a segue into, we're still in 2020,
Oy.
the year that now can officially be used as a curse word.
Seriously.
Yeah,
Oh,
go to 2020.
What a 2020.
Yeah,
He pulled such a 2020.
abso 2020 lutely.
Yeah, exactly. It just rolls off the tongue.
Thank God for internet memes to tell us how to live.
Yeah.
But one thing I was super excited to tell you about, and I don't know why, and it's probably because I don't talk to enough people these days.
This is going to be good.
Yeah, because I'm super excited.
I showered.
Is that like the thing I showered? It's so hot. It's like multiple showers a day these days. But,
Yeah.
Is that during this pandemic, coping mechanisms abound. And one of them I've learned is like an active rabbit hole on YouTube. Like just going down that active YouTube rabbit hole. And last night I found like a whole thing that's been going on for ages. But like usual, as usual, I'm way late to the party. And
I
stuff.
can't wait. I can't wait.
This is going to be the most boring reveal ever, is internet, like, reaction videos.
Yeah.
YouTube reaction videos.
Yeah.
And so I knew this existed.
Yeah.
And I was like, why do I want to watch somebody react to something?
Sure.
And I did not get it.
Yeah.
And last night, I don't know what was happening. Oh, yeah, I was watching TV. And
couple
I was
glasses of wine.
yeah. And something, I don't know why, I went onto YouTube to look at something or look something up, and something showed up on my feed, and I was like, it was like these two young men reacting to music that they'd never heard before.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
what? What is this? And it was like music that I liked.
Glenys, I am
Yeah.
so with you. I have a favorite person too, and I am
Okay.
going to give him a shout out. It is
Yeah, me too.
Mine is Jamal, aka Jamal, on YouTube, and this guy is awesome. While I'm talking, I'm gonna look up his Instagram handle because he is the best. And I found him just because same thing. He reacts to like songs I really like, and he is so like he is the nicest guy in the entire world. Like he lives here in LA. I totally want to meet him. His Instagram is Jamal JAMEL _AKA Jamal JAMAL, which is his YouTube channel also. But like what I love so much about this guy is he listens to these amazing songs that like he's never heard. Like Stairway to Heaven or Pink Floyd, Breathe.
And he's probably young. Is he young?
He's I would say like maybe in his 30s. And he
Well,
just
that's young, Aaron.
well,
That's
younger than me.
younger than both of us.
But he gets so into it. Like, he's like, oh my goodness. He like pauses. And so like, I am with you 100%, Glenys.
Okay. So yeah, this is a whole thing that I thought was stupid up until last night. When I clicked on this video of these two young guys, they're twins, and they are listening to I can't remember the first one I saw, but it was like the first one that came up. Maybe it was the Phil Collins one. They got like a CNN story, and their YouTube handle is like Twins the New Trend.
Yep.
And and I'm like, first of all, like, obviously we know nobody's music taste is universal, but everybody thinks their own music taste is universal. Like, we all think that secretly. Like, oh, how do you not know about this? And I'm like, of course they don't know about this music. They're young, and they had their own music that they grew up on, right? And so they listen to music that I love, which is the music from the 60s especially. I love.
Yeah.
And like watching them do this for the first time, watching it for the first time. Although part of me, I was like, hey, you knew when that drum fill was coming in when you were air drumming. So is this really the first time you've listened to, Kansas? And I'm thinking, yes, it probably is the first time he's listened to Kansas. But he's like, yeah, it's sometimes it's one guy, and then sometimes it's him and his brother. And they're super nice. And they're like, and can I was telling them they're not sure about a song? They're like, okay. And we're like, giving it a chance.
Yeah, right.
So, and this is, of course, we're just like going, this has nothing to do, I want to say this has nothing to do with the topic of our podcast, except I'm going to tie it in. Because the things I used to do on the internet used to be looking for nutrition information, looking for ways to lose weight without starving or being hungry and unhappy, looking for like hours lost to that. And now I'm just having hours lost to this stuff, which is so much more fun and gratifying.
Yeah.
And, I get to sit and listen to music I like. And then there is something super joyful about watching somebody discover a song you like for the first time.
Glenys,
I had no idea this was a thing.
I am, like I said, I am lock, stock in line with you on this one. And what I love about this guy also is he does a lot of different kinds of music. So like there's even a lot of like ranchera music and music from Mexico that he gets into, and like, yeah, his reactions make you want to just like download that song and put it on your playlist.
You got to grab your happiness where
I agree.
Can.
So I'm gonna add one more for one of the reactions I love the most of Jamal's here. Is I got to find the song here. It's a Led Zeppelin song.
Yeah, there's no bad Led Zeppelin song.
No bad Led Zeppelin.
Well, I don't really like Stairway to Heaven that much, but
I'll take you there.
It's the entryway into Led Zeppelin.
There you go. Like I think it's like When I Die. I forget. Oh, In My Time of Dying. There it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
it's a good one.
Watch his reaction to In My Time of Dying. It's like it's epic.
Okay.
Homework for everyone else.
This is our advice on how, like, ways to find happiness.
Yes, I'm with you.
2020, like, you just got to find them where they are.
New podcast, substream we're gonna do is like a whole music one.
Our new podcast is going to be Aaron and Glenys react to reaction videos.
Oh, that's very meta.
Wow. It just blew my mind with that.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, okay. So we really need to talk about our podcast today.
It would be good.
Yeah.
But this has been a very good segue. I know the people are going to love it.
Thank you to everybody for indulging us on that one.
Yeah.
For a full 9 minutes.
Best 9 minutes of your life.
Or not. Anyway, tell us about who we're talking to today.
Yeah. Today's guest is Marc Settembrino, Ph.D., Dr. Marc Settembrino. And let me pull up Marc's bio so we can learn a little bit more about him. Marc began practicing yoga in 2015. As a fat, queer yoga practitioner, they understand that starting a new yoga practice can be intimidating. Therefore, they create inclusive yoga classes that are accessible to every body, regardless of size, shape, age, strength, or flexibility. Their work has been featured by Om Yoga Magazine and Yoga Journal and their SuperFit Hero body positive fitness provider. They earned their Ph.D. in sociology from the University of Central Florida in 2013, and their research examines homelessness in the context of disaster. They are also the curator of their brand, Fat Kid Yoga Club, and they will talk more about what that is in the show. It's a really awesome discussion. Don't you think, Glenys?
Yeah. I loved talking to Mark, and this is you know them better than I do. But this was my first time meeting Mark, and it was so much fun. He's so nice to talk to, just pleasant to talk to. So,
yeah, I think y'all are really going to enjoy this one. So without further ado, let's tune into our conversation with Mark. Hey, welcome, Mark, to the show. We are so excited to have you on today.
I am so excited to be here. I've been listening to the show for a while now, and so it's really excited to be part of it.
Yeah. Well, I just, I've been a big fan of a lot of your work, and I just love following you on Instagram. It's probably one of my favorite feeds to check out. And we were talking about it already, but like the pool selfie game is very strong with you, Mark. So I keep sharing those.
That's my self-care during the pandemic.
Yes, listen, completely jealous. Well, to get started, and just because we mentioned your Instagram feed, can you tell us a little bit how you got started with Fat Kid Yoga Club, and how did you first get into yoga, and just a little bit of your journey that brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, and so I guess the Cliff's Notes of that is most folks, and myself included, maybe find their way to yoga during a transition point in their life, or a difficult time, and that certainly was the case for me. So I started practicing yoga not very long ago. It was in 2015, and that year was a particularly difficult year for me. Both of my grandfathers and my father passed away that year. There was a lot of stuff going on at work, and so between grief and just general life stress, I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't a very nice person to be around. And so I was like, something's got to give. And I heard that yoga can help. And so I started doing these like bedtime yoga practices that I found on YouTube. And within like the first practice, I was like falling asleep easily and sleeping through the night. And I was like, this is really helping me. And so I kept doing more. And then I found myself doing more videos on YouTube. And then eventually I found my way into a studio. And yoga has just really, the cliche answer is that yoga has changed my life in so many ways. But that's how I came to the practice. The work that I do now, though, is primarily trying to make yoga accessible for folks in larger bodies. And the reason for that is, I was always one of the fattest people in the room. And teachers didn't always know how to work with me. And it was frustrating to sort of be paying for a service, but not receiving the same support that other people were receiving. And so I wanted to make sure that other folks didn't have that same experience. And so I went through a teacher training and started teaching my own classes.
Yeah.
Cool.
You asked me about fat. Sorry. Here's
okay.
why it's important to edit, right?
Yeah.
You asked me about Fat Kid Yoga Club, so I guess I need to talk about that too.
Yeah. We'd love to hear about that. Share that.
Yeah. And so my brand, if you will, and it feels so bizarre for me to talk about myself as a brand, but I offer what's called Fat Kid Yoga Club. And that's a online offering, or it started as an online offering of pre-recorded yoga practices that I was putting up on Patreon to support an in-person yoga class that I was offering in New Orleans by the same name. And like everyone else, this pandemic has really sort of had to change the way that we operate in the world. So I'm no longer able to offer those face-to-face classes. But what I'm doing now is being able to offer size inclusive yoga online via Zoom. And my big thing is, the yoga really isn't different. The postures aren't all that different. The breath work isn't all that different. But the language that I use, the space that I create, I approach yoga from a weight neutral place. Radical acceptance is a huge part of what I hope to impart on people that are practicing with me. And the goal really is just to find some joyful movement in your body. I think for myself, as a person who's been fat pretty much my entire life, movement wasn't always joyful. A lot of times it was punishment. And I've really tried to move away from that myself and invite other people to the party as well, because we all deserve to feel good in our bodies. We all deserve to find ways to move our bodies that feel good and celebrate who we are. And that's really what I wish to bring to folks in Fat Kid Yoga Club.
No, that's fantastic. You touched on it just briefly in the beginning, and you said that you would go to these classes and paying for the same services that others were, but not getting sort of the help that you needed with being in a larger body. And I'm wondering what you might suggest to other studios or practitioners that they could do to make yoga spaces more accessible for larger bodies.
That is such an interesting question to think of right now. As I know that during our current stage of pandemic, there are many yoga studios who've gone completely online. There are others that are still opening up. And certainly that question about accessibility looks a little bit different if you're in a physical space than if you are perhaps offering classes online. But I think one of the most important aspects really has more to do with inclusion rather than accessibility. And it's a common denominator to both physical space and what you might be offering online. And that's language, how you talk about bodies, how you talk about your own body, the types of offerings that you're providing. And so, it's never happened to me, but I've heard from other fat folks that they were in classes where the yoga instructor was like openly fat shaming and really saying things like, oh, just hold that plank a little bit longer and burn off those extra cookies that you ate, right? And that is just not what I'm showing up for in my space, and not something that anyone should be subjected to. And that's like a language thing. That's something that you could easily do and just let go of the diet culture in your yoga classes, right? So that's a really important thing that folks can do to be inclusive for folks in larger bodies, along with language, but just changing the way that you even speak. So one of the things that I've done in my language is traditionally in yoga classes, they'll talk about offering modifications for different postures. And myself and others, I'm not the only person doing this, we've changed our language and we don't talk about modifying the posture. We instead talk about adapting the posture to work with your body. And I think that that's a different approach, because the idea that's presented by mainstream yoga is that there's like this one ideal form that your body should find its way into. And you can't see my air quotes around should, but they're there. And if you can't get there, then we'll modify it for you, right? Rather than thinking about, well, what are the benefits of this posture? What are we looking to be experiencing in our bodies? And how can each of us experience that differently? Because the big thing with accessibility, being size inclusive is one thing, but, each and every one of us have different ways of moving our body and being in our body. And you could get 10 people in a room and each one of those people are going to move a little bit differently. So it's really unfair to everyone if you just have one like standard, this is what it should look like, when yoga really doesn't look like anything anyway. At best, it's a feeling. And so how can we all find that feeling in the same room without doing any extra harm to ourselves?
I love that change in language that, when you were talking about modification, and as soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that is really hitting home that here's the right way to do it, but if you have to change it, I guess here's your way to do it, versus like, the guideline of the posture and adapt it to your body, and your body being the primary guide rather than the posture being the primary guide. It's a subtle shift, but that's what I heard when you were saying that.
There's a really great organization called Accessible Yoga that was founded by Jivana Heyman, who I consider to be one of my teachers. And they, size is one aspect of accessibility, but they're thinking about how do you make yoga, this practice, available to anyone who happens to be in any kind of body. So folks who might use a wheelchair, folks who may be hearing impaired or blind. Like, how do we take this practice and try to find a way? Because at its core, yoga as a feeling, as a state of mind, as a way of being, is accessible to everyone, regardless of your size or shape. Unfortunately, the beauty industry, the wellness industry has co-opted yoga to be a way to sort of sell us diets and ways of modifying our bodies. But in reality, anyone in any body can practice yoga right now in this moment. And it's going to look a little bit different for each of us, but that's the beauty of the practice.
Yeah, I love all of that so much. It makes me also think about again, before the customers might even think about it, really like how much to do this well, and without doing harm, yoga studios, teachers, really need to do a lot of work to think about these things, right? And it's not just like, oh, here's the handout on how to make my studio and my practice more inclusive. I mean, I think it involves a lot of deep work to look at how diet culture has influenced the studio, how what weight biases show up, and a lot. So I mean, it sounds like a really important piece that I hope a lot of studios are going through to help.
And that's the really interesting thing as well, is that the yoga industry itself sort of sees itself as serving a very narrow population. And so, if you imagine who's on the cover of Yoga Journal any given month, it's usually a thin white woman in a very advanced posture. And so the ideal yogi that's being sort of sold or that we're really being enticed with, right? Because those images of traditionally pretty people on magazines are there to sell you on the idea of, oh, if I practice yoga, maybe I'll get to look like that too, right? And that's what they're trying to sell us. But that's such a tiny sliver of our population. And what that's actually done to the yoga industry, it's really limited their ability to reach more people. And so during the pandemic, there's been yoga studios that they're just gone. They're out of business now. They don't exist anymore. And there are others that may close within the next year. And there's been like major chain, large yoga studios that have said they're not going to reopen. And a big part of that is because they're only serving a very small portion of the population. They're marketing to, thin people who are very able-bodied and have a lot of money. And what that means is that when your business faces a challenge, then there's less people that are going to be continuing to support your business. And so it's so important, I think, from even a business mindset of trying to be more inclusive and accessible, because it really makes your business more sustainable over the long run.
Great point. As we think about yoga and we think about health at every size and we think about fat acceptance and all the different things, I mean, I think we see a lot of intersections that show up in this, and especially around fat bodies and the LGBTQ movement. And I'm wondering just how you see sort of that intersection showing up in your work recently, and even other intersections that sort of inform your practice and inform your work right now.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's really an important question on a podcast where it's like such an audio format, right? And so it's like, now I guess is when I come out as a fat queer. And on top of that, as someone who is, would be identified as a white person. And so for me, I've really been thinking a lot this summer about the relationship between my fatness and my queerness. And so like my yoga practice really got me back into my body. And so by practicing yoga, I had to get comfortable in my body. I had to really form a relationship with myself as a fat person. And that really led me down this path of, understanding health at every size and doing my own fat liberation work. But I always maybe sort of thought of myself as sort of fat over here and queer over there. And now I'm starting to understand myself in relationship, those two aspects in relationship to one another. Because like for me in my current thinking, it feels like being queer and being fat have a lot of similarities in that they're both sort of these like stigmatized identities that can really make folks uncomfortable, because when you're like a fat liberated person and you're happy being fat, that just like flummoxes everyone else. And that really, will send people who are very committed to diet culture off the deep end, because they've invested their entire life into this very narrow perspective on how their body should be, how other people's bodies should be, and how their self-worth can be equated. And the same thing kind of happens when you're queer, because when you're queer, you're rejecting sort of this heteronormative idea of how your life should be structured, and the idea that you can only be happy if you are in a relationship, married with kids, like that whole trajectory that so many folks really commit their lives to. Queer folks challenge that. And I think that that's in some ways where we see some of the negative attitudes towards queer folks come out of, is that it's just this, wait, you're doing something completely different and you're so happy. And I think that like when I think about myself as a fat person and some of the ways that people respond to me and the comments that folks will make about, oh, you're just glamorizing being fat. Well, hell yeah, everybody should get to feel glamorous, and especially fat people, right? Like, no, I'm fat and I'm happy, and I'm going to take all the cool selfies I want to, because I deserve to be able to do that. And in reality, so do you, right? Like, you 100% do deserve to feel fat and happy in your body, and you deserve that, and I want you to have that, period.
Yeah.
It really comes down to like challenging the status quo in any way is always very dangerous, right? You're seen as very dangerous. Like, how dare you challenge the convention? And it sounds like you've identified that in both those, parts of your life, like it is very much not even purposely, I don't think, right? Like just being happy and fat in our body shouldn't be considered challenging the status quo. And yet there it is, right? And being able to live your life how you want shouldn't be challenging the status quo. And yet there it is. So, and that's where I think people just sort of get their hackles up, where it's like, don't challenge the status quo. It's safe.
Well, so many folks are committed to it, right? And I think, I even believed, and Virgie Tovar's work really has been helpful for me, and her book, You Have a Right to Be Fat, like really, I was just like, that flipped the switch for me in a lot of ways. And, I think so many folks are committed to their life looking a certain type of way in a very specific body that they have or will have. And so I remember, times in my life where I was like living for this future thin self that may or may not exist, and just letting all of these wonderful experiences that I could have been having pass by because I was so committed to I can only be happy when I look a certain way. And that just is not true. And so now that I've embraced allowing myself to feel good, to be happy, to um, just live my life without this expectation of what tomorrow is going to be has really been so liberating in so many ways.
Just quickly, I wanted to backtrack because I don't think you mentioned it too much of it earlier, but it sounds like you have a past with trying to change what your body looks like. And I just wanted to touch on that for a second. Like, how long did that go on for? And then did your work in yoga sort of help you kind of get away from that?
Yes. So I don't remember at what point, but at some point as a kid, I became a fat kid, right? And so it was like, I was, in elementary school and shopping in the Husky section and all of that. And I think, there were different points as a child where, my parents would try to put me on diets and stuff like that. But I think as a teenager, and this kind of brings me back to being fat and queer, as a teenager coming out as gay, being part of the gay community, I would be interested in dating someone and they would say things like, oh, you're really cute, you've got a handsome face, but I'm not into fat guys or I don't date bigger guys. And so for me, it became like I need to lose weight so that I can be attractive enough to have a boyfriend or find love. And so there was, a whole bunch of stuff that I did. I've paid personal trainers thousands of dollars. When I think about the amount of money that I paid to be like publicly humiliated by like these Jillian Michael wannabe trainers that would, work me until I felt nauseous or dizzy, like just for the idea that if I do this hard enough, someone will think that I'm attractive and then I'll be happy. That mindset really, for like, I wish in my 20s I had the mindset I have now. And really practicing yoga, I think, was what brought me back into my body. And it wasn't easy at first because when I started practicing yoga, I was like, the fat person in the room, and there might be other folks in the room doing things, doing postures like downward facing dog. That was my kryptonite, my nightmare. And there would be folks in the room that are much older than me, and this is maybe where my ableism comes in or came in at the time. Folks much older than me that could do postures that I just physically couldn't do. And that became a place of really negative self-talk, self-shaming. That inner critic was just, you did this to yourself. You let yourself get out of shape. You let yourself get this heavy, and now you can't do these things. And through my yoga practice, I had to get through that. I had to get away from that inner self-critic and find ways to do the practice without abusing myself. And so, that was its own journey in and of itself. But a big thing that really helped me in my yoga practice was really learning that my downward dog didn't have to look like everyone else's downward dog in the room, and that I could adapt that downward dog to work with my body, or better yet, that my worth, my value as a human being is not tied to my ability to do a downward dog, period. And so that's something I really had to learn for myself. And I also offer to the people who take classes with me. It's like, we're not trying to collect poses. That's not what's going to get us to enlightenment, if you will. The goal here is really to be present in the body that you have, the mind that you have, and knowing that your body might change. The body we have today is not the body we're going to have tomorrow. And ultimately, one day we're going to lose that body altogether. And so really becoming a practitioner of radical acceptance and just noticing what is possible today. And, some days we want to celebrate what's possible today, but really trying not to allow ourselves to get too attached with what today is versus what tomorrow might be.
Yeah, that mindfulness, right? Yeah.
Yes.
That is a perfect segue, though, what you were talking about, adapting the postures again. A perfect segue into my next question, which is, so many people talk about, especially my clients, especially if they had been in thinner bodies and then they, gained weight because they weren't supposed to be in thinner bodies. And they used to do yoga and they're like, I just can't do it the way I used to. And I feel really discouraged. And I'm wondering what you offer as encouragement to someone to do that. Same thing of adapting postures, to help them get past that shame that they feel that they somehow have to do it differently.
So I get a lot of clients who sound like yours, who are folks that, used to practice yoga years ago in a body that is long gone, right? Because none of us have the same body today that we did 20 years ago. Even if you're wearing the same size clothing today as you did 20 years ago, your body has changed in different ways, and it's not necessarily going to move the same way it did when you were 20, right? So we just have to accept that. But in general, whether you are coming back to yoga after having been gone for a long time, or you're brand new, you've never practiced yoga asana before, well, whenever we're starting something new, we all are bad at it. Nobody just gets on the mat and does a handstand, right? So one of the things that I try to do for my clients is just to make space to be okay with not being good instantly. And that word good is so subjective in and of itself. But, knowing that it takes some time to get used to moving your body. And, the interesting thing for me is that my body weight has changed while I've practiced yoga. So there's been times while I'm practicing yoga when my body's a little smaller. Right now, my body's a little bit larger. And I notice that it doesn't always move in the same ways, or that I need to adapt my postures in different ways. But for me, it's more of a practice of curiosity and learning to adapt and be present with what's going on now, and how can I not get attached to this is what it should be, and instead just be cool with this is what's happening now. And that's not easy by any feat, right? And I like to say I'm not that kind of doctor, right? I'm a sociologist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not your therapist. But a big part of it is just giving yourself permission, right? Giving yourself permission to get back to being familiar with the practice, and it's going to look and feel different. And trust me, as a fat person, I know that being in the world in a larger body is difficult in general, right? Having to navigate chairs, having to navigate, there's one studio that I teach at where the bathroom doorways are pretty narrow. Just being someone in a larger body in a smaller space makes you feel one kind of way. And I know that in myself, sometimes that those external things, what happens in the outside world, will also show up on my mat. And I just have to make more space for myself. And so that's a big thing that I teach to my clients as well, is just take up all the room that you need on your mat. Make the space that's going to support you. And that might mean taking your feet wider. That might mean taking your arms wider. Really knowing that there is no one way to do it, and giving yourself permission to experience it in your body that you have right now. That's the work, and that's the goal. It's not standing on your head isn't the goal. The goal is really getting to a place of awareness and acceptance where you're at, period.
The way you talk about all of this, Marc, it really makes me think about how if we can really help challenge the weight stigma and the weight bias that is sometimes showing up in this work and helping clients feel safe, how important this can be to that body acceptance journey and overall fat acceptance. So I really appreciate a lot of the language you bring into us today, especially the piece. The one I'm going to really sit with is, even if your clothes are the same size that they were 10 or 15 years ago, your body is not the same. And I think as I get older, I'm definitely noticing that aspect that doesn't get as much conversation to this topic. So I really just appreciate the language you bring into this.
Thank you. Yeah, I try to, as you can tell, these are things that I really, really think about and I'm really, really passionate about. Going back to one of the things I said earlier, one of the most important things we could do in the yoga world is change our language and change the ways that we present the practice to people.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So you mentioned being a professor of sociology, and so I'd love to just explore that a little bit, and just can you share with us a little bit about how that has been, a part of your work, an informed part of your work, and probably how you've taken yoga into your work as a professor.
Yeah, it's also been an interesting journey because my interests in sociology were never about the body until I started practicing yoga. And so, I'm really, I've studied a lot on social inequality. Feminist theory has really influenced the way that I view the world. Queer theory has influenced the way that I view the world. I've got, a strong anti-capitalist underpinning. And yet I never thought, or my inquiry never went to bodies. And I think a big reason for that had to do, when I was a baby sociologist starting my master's degree, I thought that I was actually just coming off of a medical weight loss program where I had, paid several $100s, probably more than that, to lose weight. And so my mindset at the time was very much like, that there was a hierarchy of bodies and certain bodies didn't deserve to exist. And that feels really icky to say now, but I mean, that's what diet culture tells us, right? Is that, certain bodies shouldn't be. And I was very much ingrained in that. But now through my yoga practice, I've been getting more and more interested in fat studies and fat liberation work. Because that's where I am. And I'm starting to understand my own experience as a fat person. And that's starting to guide my research a little bit more. So earlier this year, I did a survey of fat folks who enjoy hiking and looking at the experiences that fat folks have on the trail and when shopping for hiking gear. So that's a project I'm working on with my friend Laura Burns. And so we're hoping to be able to present some findings from that soon. And so that's really like the interesting thing is the questions that I'm asking now as a sociologist have really been transformed since doing my own fat liberation work. And so it's really amazing when I get to sort of think about all the ways in which all the new possibilities that have come into my life when I just said, you know what, I'm not going to diet anymore. I believe that my body's worthy and everyone else's body is worthy just as it is. So let's see what's possible in life in this body that I have and the body that you have and go from there.
Yeah, fat studies that's an area that I just think, like, I get so excited when I hear people saying that they work in that area, and I just feel like it's so ripe with possibilities right now. So it's super cool to hear you talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, it's been an interesting field to get into. And the thing is that I'm behind. Fat studies is not new, right? Just because I'm new to the question doesn't mean that it's new. Like that, there's been folks been doing this work for several decades now, and so I'm having to play catch up, and so it's kind of fun in that way because I get to be a student again, and start from the beginning.
Yeah, I can't wait to sort of hear what comes of that, as your work expands into that area. If somebody wants to do a yoga class with you, where do they find you?
Yeah, so as my neighbor's dog is barking like wild, I don't know what's going on.
We have many
there.
pet visits during the
Don't worry about it.
Whether our audience knows that or not, we have frequent pet visits. So we welcome your neighbor's dog.
Yes. So yeah, if folks are looking to connect with me, Instagram is like the quick place to find me. And so you can find me at Fat Kid Yoga Club. But I also offer pre-recorded yoga classes on Patreon. And so patreon.com/Fat Kid Yoga Club. Or you can go to fatkidyogaclub.com, and that'll take you to my website, where there's also the opportunity to take some live yoga classes with me as well via Zoom. So I'm currently offering a couple classes a week, and hoping to be able to offer more as I kind of get a better feel for the technology, for my schedule, for life in general. And so, yeah, those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me. And I also do I don't call it private yoga instruction. I call it private yoga coaching, because I really prefer to meet with folks, talk about their lives in a much more holistic way, rather than most folks who are teaching private yoga. It's like, okay, let's meet, roll out your mat. I'll ask you to do some things and we'll go from there. But I want to meet you where you're at and talk about what is it that you're doing? What are your goals, and how can we use yoga to support those goals? And so, yeah, I'm also available for a few private sessions as well.
What an amazing resource for people. I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm hoping you'll be okay after this episode when everybody floods you with requests. I think that you are just what so many of my clients are looking for. And, we know that there are fat yoga practitioners, but there needs to be more fat yoga practitioners, right? There's not a limit here. We want more and more and more. So,
and I think also just having a male identified, larger bodied yoga practitioner is also really important. And again, I hope you get really busy through all of this, because I can think of a bunch of people as well who would just benefit because they don't see other male identified folks doing this.
Yeah, it's so it's been really interesting as well. One of the things, speaking of how many fat yoga instructors there are, earlier, I think it was back in June, I organized what I thought was going to be a small Zoom call of fat yoga teachers. And we ended up having 141 people register for the Zoom call.
That's amazing.
So, yeah. And so right now, there's a group of us that are trying to organize like a crowdsourced fat yoga teacher calendar, so that if it's like, oh, hey, it's Friday at 4:00, I've got some free time. Who's teaching a yoga class? You can just go and find a yoga class to take online in your living room with a fat yoga teacher. So, I'm definitely just really glad to be part of such a growing community of yoga instructors that are in larger bodies. And my goal is always to be that yoga instructor that I really needed when I was in my 20s, right? Instead of going to these, I'm trying not to be disparaging, but going to these personal trainers in gyms that really were exploiting my insecurities and making them worse. Like that's the last thing I want to do for folks. I'm trying to get them plugged back into their bodies. And someone recently described me as masculine of center, and I think that's something that's like really resonated with me, because there's not as many visible fat men teaching yoga in the world. And so a lot of folks read me off the back as a man. I've recently come out as non-binary, and so that's been an interesting experience in and of itself. But someone who I consider to be one of my teachers and to be someone who's really paved the way for a lot of us is Michael Hayes, who founded Buddha Body Yoga in New York City. And he's been doing this work probably since the 90s, I think. And he's doing amazing work too. So I think it's interesting because I get a lot of folks who come to me because they think I'm the fat gay guy teaching yoga, and I'm like, well, that's almost true. I'm the fat queer doing yoga, and we'll make decisions about gender later.
And so I will apologize formally for doing that just a little bit earlier on our show.
Yeah, hey, it happens. And one of the fun things for me too is I think, so many of us are, or I'll speak for myself, right? I'm in a place right now where I'm embracing possibility. And a big part of that was, getting comfortable in my body, getting comfortable in my fatness, and saying, what's possible in this body that I have now? And I think the more that I have personally spent time reflecting on gender and my queerness and my body, that the best way that I can describe myself in this moment is as non-binary. And for me, that opens up so many more possibilities and ways of being. And so I'm just really leaning into the possibilities and oftentimes less concerned about policing what people think about me, because that's not my business.
Yeah, it makes it easier, right? When you when you are just like, okay, it's not my business, I guess. Yeah, it can. Yeah, can be a choice. That can be a choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great talking to you, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us. I have loved getting to know you today.
Yes, it's been so much fun. Well, I feel like I already know y'all because I listen to y'all all the time, but it's been fun actually getting to have a real conversation instead of just like talking at the speaker,
Right.
When
Yeah.
it's like listening to an episode and I'm like, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We're much more interactive.
Yeah, I got to be part of the conversation, which has been so much fun. I've really learned so much. I've worked with Aaron before, and just listening to the podcast really has been so helpful to me. So I'm really grateful to you all for putting this out there, because the folks that you've had on have taught me, but you're really giving those folks that platform, and I think it's really important, because I probably wouldn't be where I am today in terms of thinking about myself, my body, my relationship to food, without this podcast. So it's really great to be in community with you all.
Well, thank you. And you can just call us anytime, because we'll just talk on the phone. We're lonely.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm always open to that. Yeah.
Deal.
All right. Thanks again for being on the show, Marc.
Thank you.